Hi everyone, welcome to this Google Digital Garage session on Build Engaging Presentations. Now I'm Annie, and just a little bit about myself. I've been part of the Google Free Digital Skills Programme for over 6 years now. And I've also had my own business, which has required me to have both the company launch presentations, to speak at conferences of hundreds and thousands of people, not hundreds of thousands, but hundreds and thousands of people, and to speak also in one-to-one meetings and to my teams. So there's many different times that we'll use a presentation, and hopefully I'll be able to help you today. And we're lucky that I'm not alone today. We're going to be joined by Francois, who is another digital skills trainer with the Google Digital Garage, and he'll be interacting with you in the chat. So if you want to join in and speak to Francois, you simply sign into YouTube. You'll know who he is both by his name and a blue little spanner next to his name. So please do share any questions with Francois there, because this is where we want to help you. We want to answer any questions, any fears, any doubts that you may have as regards presentations today. So please do sign in. Now, there's many other sessions that we do as the Google Digital Garage at g.co/digital garage, and you can find that in the link below. Some of the sessions include writing for social media, which you may find useful, and I might talk about a bit later on, and also build your personal brand online. So have a look at some of those sessions and more besides, and please do join us again. So if you do have any problems seeing or hearing us, just refresh your screen. That often irons out any of the difficulties we have. But now we're going to get started with today's presentation. So we like to break our presentations down into bite-sized areas. And this is often a nice way to let people know a beginning, a middle, and an end. So we've got 3 points to our presentation today. The first is looking at how we can create familiar things within a presentation to create a desired effect for our audience, how to craft that all-important presentation to make the impact that we want to the right audience that we're speaking to. And then it's knowing where to start. So creating those effective presentations require a number of steps of thinking before we can go and share our presentation publicly. The more we prepare and we practice, the better it will be in the end. Also, we need to think about gaining our confidence in presenting. So we don't all get born presenters. In fact, that's quite an illusion that people just find it easy to present. Most people work at it like any other skill. And we're going to talk through some of those bits and pieces of how we can present more confidently as we go through today. So another thing I want to point out, as well as the Google Digital Garage resources that we have, is that Google are also offering careers certificates. So what we've found is that there's some very high in demand, high growth areas that people might want to become a part of in the world today. And those careers don't require, for you to do this certificate, you don't require any degree or experience in the subject. But we cover topics such as IT support, data analysis, project management, UX design, and also e-commerce. And all of these are very in demand and high growth areas. So do take a look at the Google Careers Certificates. And I'm sure Francois will kindly share that link, which is goo.gul/careercert UK there in the chat for you. So do take a look. I want us now, before we get started with how to create our own presentation, to think about other people's presentations first. So what memorable presentations do we have? These could be for a positive reason, for a negative reason. Perhaps we've had experiences that have really stood out for reminding us what not to do. So I remember, for example, being at university and the lecturer turning away from everybody, standing against the board, which was then a blackboard, writing on the board and not engaging with us. He didn't look at us, he didn't talk to us, he didn't ask questions, and he also kept the same tone throughout the whole presentation. And I remember many of us falling asleep throughout it. Now, I'd really love to hear your presentation experiences. It's such a great way for us to know where you're at, what your experiences are, and what you loved and what you hated. One of the better presentations that I've seen, one of the most memorable for a good reason, was by Steve Jobs when he launched some of the Apple products. He was such a visionary, such a dreamer, and he sold that dream to us. He gave us the reason why we should buy the products. So maybe there's some that stand out in your memory as being good or bad presentations, and we'd really love to hear some of your examples there in the chat. Now, there's a bit of a delay from what you put in the chat and what I see. And I've just seen a few hellos. So first of all, hello to Edenkel in Lagos, Nigeria. Hi there, thanks for joining us. And Ali for Tanzania. And yeah, welcome to all of you and thanks for joining us. And please do engage with us in the chat. We love to get to know you. We love to know what's useful to you and how we can help. So please do get involved. Now, why do we present? What is the purpose? Now, I mentioned a few different kinds of presentations I've done at the beginning, and there's many reasons why we might present. But communication is actually key to everything in life. It makes us more accessible in a relationship, it makes us grow those bonds, and it does the same within work-based environments as well as with audiences. It can connect us in a way that really will bring forward ideas and inspire and educate people. But people don't know what you think until you speak. So the chances are your career now very much does depend on how you speak and what you write and what you think in that order. So speaking comes from our thoughts, from what we write, and all of that together is the way we communicate with our audience and bring them forward into an idea. And you've got to remember, unfortunately, our attention spans are diminishing. So where they used to be minutes, we're down to seconds, and it's something like 8.25 seconds for the average attention span, and probably depleting even since the pandemic with more use of technology. But with social media, it's as low as 2-3 seconds. So thinking about that means the way that we connect with people and the way we communicate and how we communicate is more relevant, more important, and impactful than ever. So when we think about the minds of others, we need to think about how we're going to engage and what we need to come across with as we do that. So we might engage and present to communicate a clear message. We might want to persuade them into an idea, or we might want to instruct them. So we could inform, instruct, inspire, entertain, or persuade in any of our presentations. So it's important for us to think about what kind of presentation we're wanting to achieve. Now, I'm just sharing here a TED Talk. You might have come across TED Talks, but I'd really love for you to watch this presentation first and tell me what your thoughts are about what this presentation might mean to you.
What you're doing right now, at this very moment, is killing you. More than cars or the internet, or even that little mobile device we keep talking about, the technology you're using the most almost every day is this, your tush. Nowadays, people are sitting 9.3 hours a day, which is more than we're sleeping at 7.7 hours. Sitting is so incredibly prevalent, we don't even question how much we're doing it. And because everyone else is doing it, it doesn't even occur to us that it's not okay. So instead of going to coffee meetings or fluorescent lit conference room meetings, I ask people to go on a walking meeting to the tune of 20 to 30 miles a week. It's changed my life. You'll be surprised at how fresh air drives fresh thinking, and in the way that you do, you'll bring into your life an entirely new set of ideas. Thank you.
So that was Nilofer Merchant, and she's doing a TED Talk. And a TED Talk is about spreading ideas. It's about sharing an idea that we can connect with and that has a powerful message so that we want to share and spread it further. So she's sharing a simple message here, but something that can really change our lives. The idea that sitting is potentially killing us, is making us poorly by not getting up and moving around. I know since the pandemic, we've got out more, we've got into nature more, and many of us have started to do a lot more walking. But this was pre-pandemic, and the idea was that we could be more free, we could be healthier by exploring our meetings whilst walking. So not only does it mean that we can have more creative thought, but we can get healthier whilst we do that walking. So I wonder what you took away from this presentation. How effective do you think the presenter was? What sort of things made it effective? I think for me at the beginning, when she said the first part, which was what you're doing is killing you, sitting is killing you, was probably a wake-up call to many of us and made us pay attention. So think about that kind of introduction and what that means to you. Another hello from Stephanos in London. Hi there, Stephanos. Thanks so much for joining us. And it's great, again, to get an international audience. Always nice to see and hear from lots of people around the world. Do explore TED Topics as well, by the way, because it is a great way to learn about a modern way to present. Excuse me. Because what we're actually doing is we're not delivering a presentation, we're actually telling a story. A story is something we can all relate to. It builds communities. It's developed us with from very young. And oh, I've just got a message from Ali. It grabbed attention from the get-go and followed up with facts. Effective. Absolutely. Thank you, Ali. Great answer there. Yes, it's about capturing that attention right at the beginning, giving facts, but also giving that story about what we're doing in our daily lives. We're sitting and making it personalized to the audience. So thank you, Ali. So we're telling a story, aren't we? We're telling a story that's important, that connects people, that makes people really listen and understand where we're coming from. It's got to be relatable. It's building that community. It's building that tribe up around our ideas. And we have stories that are much more interesting than facts, although facts will be interwoven, I'm sure. But stories are the things we grow up with. Think of those that you have as a child and how you can escape the moment by going in to the story itself and feeling the narrator's experience firsthand by listening and hearing the whole journey. So a story tends to share a journey from the beginning to the end. And we're going to talk about that in a bit more detail. But it's about building on one key idea bit by bit. So her key idea in this talk was that sitting was going to kill us. And then she shared the important points as to how we can resolve that and what were the issues. And it started with the beginning, that really arresting headline about it's killing us, to taking us into the middle, the discovery about why and the what and the facts, and then ending with the final thoughts about what we might want to take away from the presentation. So they're a really important ingredient to our presentations, our stories. Now, there's different types of stories that we have. Different types communicate messages in different ways, and we might use them interchangeably. But the kinds of stories that we use within the workplace and within business are often the four that we're seeing on the screen now. So an origin story is a really relatable topic. It's something nice that people can connect with. And it's often quite a humble story as well. So I met a gentleman who had started a business from scratch, but his backstory was really interesting. So he'd worked very successfully in the City of London as a very high up accountant. And then after doing that, he unfortunately discovered that his mother was very poorly. So he came back to look after his mother, and he had to effectively restart his work over again. Now, where he was living didn't have the jobs that he'd seen in the city. So he decided to build his own business. He didn't have a home as such, so he started it from a caravan. He lived in that caravan and built the business from scratch, and now has his own successful accountancy practice. Now, this story can relate to us for so many reasons. We go through hardships in life, we go through difficulties, it can be health problems, it can be money problems. And when that person shares a story like that, we can see a part of ourselves in them. And that is what is really attractive in an origin story. An origin story can reach your internal employees and get them really connected with your values and what your business is there to do. It can really reach prospects as well, potential clients that can start to see themselves in the business and feel that they'll be understood and empathized with. So effectively, what we're doing in an origin story is showing the hardships of life, the humility of life, and how we're all in it together. So bringing people into that kind of story is a really important narrative. Another one we might use is a future vision. So this is opposite of the origin story we were just talking about. It's about painting that dream, that future belief of the business or of a certain product, such as Apple was describing with Steve Jobs. So that future vision is very much about taking us on the journey as to what that will mean in the future, what that will be for us as clients or us as workers. What will that mean to us in terms of the desired results in the future? Another is failed and success stories. Well, we all know, I think by now, that life is not just one easy ride to the top. There's very much an up and down, highs and lows, and the failures are as important as the successes. And again, it brings us into that kind of narrative that makes sense to us because we've all tried and failed before we've succeeded. And in fact, the most successful business fails 7 times before succeeding altogether. So sharing that really genuine story that there will be dips before we peak is a way to bring in people to our story about we've learned our lessons, we've gone through these failures, but they've actually taken us into the next step of success and how this is going to give us the outcome that we want. The final one is the realization. Now, this can happen in many aspects of life. We might go through a relationship, through a job, through a business, and think that we're on the track that we want to be on until suddenly something comes along and teaches us that that is not the track that we want to take. And actually, there might be something more suited to us in a different direction. Excuse me. So that is where we look at a realization story. And we might, for example, the one on screen is about somebody working in finance, and suddenly, after attending an event, they have a eureka moment that perhaps they want to be instead in marketing. So it's never too late to follow our dreams and to do the things that we really want to do. And these stories are the ones, again, that connect us and really we want to listen to and keep our attention. And remember the TED Talk story that we saw, it was very much a realization that we don't need to have meetings while we sit down. We can have them while we walk. So when we use our story types that we've just talked about, it can be for different reasons. And these are the 3 typical kinds of presentations we might come across most regularly when we're at work. The first is the finance report. So for a finance report, you might want to look at a story such as failure to success. So where we've learned that this product wasn't successful, we did our research and found that by adding these elements in, we can make it successful. There's many examples of where things have failed, the lessons they've taught us can tell us where we go next in terms of our finance report and where we can grow for the better future. Company update. Again, that origin story that I talked about as regards the gentleman who started out in the caravan and grew his own business from scratch during very difficult, adverse times is a way to show how we can be resilient, a story of focusing, of moving forward. And that's really great to update our employees and keep people aware of what our company is doing. So it's a lovely story to share. It's also sometimes the why of our business, the reason our business exists. And because there are so many businesses out there now, the why can be the greatest reason that someone chooses your business over another. And the final one, the ideas pitch. So this is more about your vision of your future, a very Apple product, thinking about how we can be different, how we can be bold, how we can be beautiful in the future, this vision of an idea we've got that we want to paint and share and tell the story of how that's going to be to our audience. The most important thing, though, of any presentation is to really know why we're doing it. We have to have a goal. We have to be clear on what we want to achieve. So what do we want to achieve from this presentation? And what do we want our audience, our participants, to do next as a result of that presentation that we've given? So there are lots of things to consider, and we need to set that goal really clearly from the start so that we make sure that we can see that the goal has been reached and that we're not just going to start talking about lots and lots of things without any direction. The goal gives us a very clear, focused, simple directive to what we're talking about. Much as the TED Talk, we know that the simple message there was walk, don't sit, and it's killing us to do so. So what is our message that we want to share? The next is looking at, what do we want them to think? What do we want our audience to think? You know, how are we going to highlight our topics, our facts throughout the presentation to really get them to consider what we're saying? How can we bring it to life and integrate those highlighted moments into our presentation? It's important to really think about these points in advance so that we can bring those points in the right way and the right time of the presentation as we talk to our audience. So it's not just the facts, it's also how we want them to think when they are watching our presentation and what we want them to do. And what do we want them to feel? So we never forget. We can forget what people say, we can forget what people do, but we never forget how they make us feel. And that's true of any context in life. So if we can build that rapport and get people to feel what we're feeling, resonate with us, empathize, that will be something that people remember far more than a list of facts or details that may be very eye-capturing. This is more about personalizing your narrative so that you're bringing in your audience and making them feel something as a result of your presentation. So you might want to highlight some important areas, some important thoughts that you'd like to share that you think are going to make a difference to that audience that you're speaking to. Make it personal, think what will matter to them, build eye contact, point people out by name, connect with them. Everybody is a person, everybody wants to connect. So it's about building that into a presentation and making them feel something as a result. Now, the other thing, as well as the goal, is what is the one thing that you want your audience to take away as a result? So it might be that, for example, we want them to take an action in the business. We might want to get a promotion. We might want to get people to try our product. But it might be even simpler, like the TED Talk, to get people to think about doing one thing in their day-to-day lives that is being more active, more healthy in a simple way. And that one compelling thought can really make all the difference. And people can spend hours on training pursuits, but if they take one key thing, it can change the dial and change the difference to their business, to their lives, very simply, but very powerfully. So think about, what is that one thing that you want to change the dial on to make a difference from your presentation, that one takeaway thing? If nothing else mattered in that presentation, think about that one thing. So in TED Talks, we know it's about get moving, keep healthy, and do what you normally do in a different context. Don't be formal, be informal, get moving. So what could be your one key takeaway? The next is looking at basic structure and flow. So as with the stories, we need a beginning, a middle, and an end. And we're only as good as the preparation we put into something. And this is very true of presentations. We need to take the time to do the research and set the background to our story that we're going to share with our audience. So when we're researching, we want to look for those high points, for the relevant points and facts we want to convey, but also those highlighted moments, those sub-moments throughout the presentation. And you might want to do it in bullet points for your own memory, for the beginning, the middle, and the end, and take them on that journey. Sit down and perhaps start with a provocative statement, like we saw in the TED Talk. What you're doing right now, sitting, watching this, not moving, is killing you. So it sounds extreme, but it's capturing attention. You might want to tell that origin story, for example, that brief story or anecdote. Let them know about your humble beginnings. You may say something that shocks or surprises the audience, again, a bit like the TED Talk. But how are you going to capture their attention, first of all? Then you need to think about, what is the problem we're solving? So every presentation, every story looks to have a problem where we're finding a solution. So think about those in your bullets and highlights. What is the problem and how are we overcoming the problem? What is the solution to that problem? And then bring it in to a nice conclusion where you're taking away your key insights and giving those to the audience as a gift to move on with. Now, the design is important in this as well, and making sure that it's clear and enhances what we're saying rather than detracts from what we're saying. And we're going to talk a bit more about design as we go along. So this is really not just telling a story, it's telling a story to an audience. So we want to create something that is connecting to a particular group. So I know of certain people that go out and give presentations to specific business groups. And I'll talk about that a bit more later on, but those particular business groups will have different messages that they need. So think about the story of the audience that you're wanting to speak to. But also, as a bit of homework, time yourself. See if you can share something, a story that inspired you for, say, 3 minutes. You could record it on your phone to yourself and play it back and see where you could improve. Or you could do it to a small audience, to friends, to family, and see which works well for you. Within that, you could try your different story types. You could perhaps, for the same message, try origin. You might try failure and success. See which one is most compelling to the story you want to share, and try them out and see which you feel most comfortable with. Now, we're just having a pause for questions. It looks like Francois is doing an amazing job in the chat for us and answering all our questions. So there's none so far, but do keep those questions coming. We're going to have a couple more breaks throughout this presentation, and I want to answer any questions you have and be of much help to you as possible. So now we're going to look at building effective presentations. Now we know of the story types that we might use and the research and structure we might go with. We now need to look at exploring some tools to help bring this to life and make it effective for us to tell that story in the most compelling way. So first is thinking about the presentation tools that we need for our particular audience. So how many people are we presenting to? I mentioned at the beginning that I've presented to different types of audiences. So I might have a one-to-one meeting with, for example, mentoring my clients, or it may in the past have been to big conferences or launching businesses to a certain group of hundreds or perhaps up to thousands. All of these are different audience sizes and require different messages. They are all extremely different. So we need to think about what is the size of that audience and what do they need to know. If you're going for a job, for example, you were doing a work presentation, you might have a very different style to a panel, to a one-to-one, to a group. So first think about the audience and what they want to know. Then think about the message itself. Do they all need the same information? How can you keep different people engaged throughout your presentation? Give them something perhaps to look at. We all learn differently. Some of us read, some of us like audio visual, some of us like to engage and ask questions. So think about the different ways in which you can connect with your audience depending on the size of the group. You also want to think about the tools and technology available. So you might, for example, if you're delivering online, need different tools for different situations. It might be a Hangout if it's one-to-one, or if you're doing sort of a televised approach like we're doing now, you might need a moderator like we've got with Francois. So a moderator will be there to support you as you're doing your presentation. And this can really add value, particularly if there's any delay in the presentation or you're not able to answer the questions directly as you're going through your presentation. So think about what kind of tools, techniques you might need to take you through those different audiences and different presentation styles. You don't have to use slides. It's not an essential ingredient. It's not mandatory, but sometimes it can really enhance the presentation. So think about what it's going to add rather than what's going to take away. What you don't want is to people to be staring at a screen and not listening to you. So think about the kinds of presentations you might need. So there's different tools we can think about to engage our audience in different ways. So the first one is mural.co, and thank you, Francois, for sharing that in our chat. So mural.co is an interactive tool to start sharing ideas and brainstorming ideas as a team. So while we've been more used to remote working and that's on the rise, it's a great way for engaging groups. Perhaps you're a leader in a company and you want to share ideas with your group. That will be like an online pinboard of ideas and a fantastic way to collaborate. Canva is a very useful tool for creating designs and visuals that we might need for our presentation, but also will take us on a journey with the presentation as well, adding logos and visuals as we go. And Slido is a very important tool, particularly when you want to create an engaged audience. So Slido helps us to find out what our audience is thinking, which is really key. Feedback is always a useful thing that we can get from any presentation. We can all learn, we can all develop. And Slido gives us that feedback by asking people what they think and then giving us analytics that we can then refer to later on. It also does ice-breaking questions and polls, so it can be a really useful way to get engaged. And sometimes we might not want to use any tools at all. So I've seen a question come through from Lucky. Thank you for that, and I'll answer that in the next question break. And hello also to Mitchell. Thank you for joining us. And Sunida, lots of you here today. Thank you very much for joining, and I hope that this is of use to you today. So next, we're going to choose our tools. So many presentations, particularly online sessions, do require to build a presentation to back up what we're saying. So for example, right now, having that visual aid is probably adding value to you and helping you know how the presentation flow is going and the things that you need to pay attention to might appear on the screen. So in these cases, presentations can be very useful indeed, as well as to big audiences. And we can create these presentations on mobile, laptop, computer. We can do it on many different devices. And now let's see what tools we might want to try. So one of the tools I'm going to take you through as an example today is Google Slides. Now, this is online, it's free. What I love about it is it's very good for collaboration. And as I mentioned, as we work in teams at a distance remotely, we can get insight and invites from others in the team by using tools like this that collaborate. It's real time, it's sharing information, and it's a really useful thing to do. We also have Microsoft, which is the PowerPoint. So it's a cut down version that they do for free, but there is a cut down free version. The full version with all the suite, that's paid for. And then Prezi, it adds animations, but that isn't free. Now you might want to think, however, if animations is going to add to your presentation, if it's needed, go through the questions in your head. Is this going to make it more interesting, or is it going to distract people from the presentation? Is it going to add value to what you're saying, or does it take people in a different direction? Think about that before adding any animations in. And Keynote, I'm sure Apple users will be very familiar with this, but this is another option for you in terms of presentation tools. Now, they all have differences, but they have things in common as well. So we're going to go through Google Slides as an example for you. So as I mentioned, collaboration is really key. And when you're writing a presentation, you're going to want other people's ideas in there. So you might have other people researching it, adding points, sharing ideas, and that's where the collaborative side is so useful to you. And what's particularly valuable is it keeps the whole history of who said, did what within that presentation format. So we'll be able to see the other people working on that presentation and the history so that we can make those changes that we need to and also revert to the history should we have to. And the wonderful thing about it is you don't need a USB flash drive. It is literally you plug in to a Wi-Fi and there it is. It goes everywhere with you. So it's a really nice thing for accessing anywhere online. All you need is a Wi-Fi connection. So a great thing for revision history and also for not needing a USB. But the other thing is you can, if you want, create it into a PDF or make it into PowerPoint. So there's no real limits to what you can do with the Google Slides. It's just about what you need it for. The next is choosing a theme. Now, it's really important that we customize a theme that creates a consistent one voice, one look throughout the presentation so that we know we're following the same storyline from the start to the end. And this is what Google Slides offers in terms of themes. And it gives you many different options for different scenarios in terms of the kinds of presentations you might create. And it gives that nice, consistent text feel and look that we want. It also has some subsections, some headings, some section breaks, and it helps you to build up your presentation very neatly. So a more advanced feature that's easy to use within Google Slides is the custom theme. So this allows you to build in, if you've got a brand and you want that brand image and brand to be seen, it helps you to bring in your logo, to make in your colors, to make sure your presentation says and does what you want it to do in terms of your branding and your values as a business, bringing it through. Now, if you don't know about brand guidelines, I really invite you to get those clear and straight right from the beginning. And one of the sessions that we do at Google Garage is on writing for social media. And we talk there about brand guidelines. So do take a look at that session at g.co/digital garage. But those simple rules around building brand guidelines can make all the difference to making it stand out. Because once we're known for something, we're seen consistently everywhere for it. That's how the brand is built. And that's important in every presentation we do too. And remember, it doesn't need to be really fancy. In fact, simple is often better. We don't want to distract people from our message. Now, if you use Google Docs or you've worked word processing software before, this kind of layout will be familiar to you in terms of the features and the functionality we have available. But have a look at beginning your presentation through Google Slides and the kinds of things you can do with it. So for example, when you present, you can have presentation notes, which can back up some key bullets of what you're talking about. Also, you can add a text box and images. You might want to add videos, whatever you feel will add value and attraction to what you're saying. You can put in very nice and easily through these different boxes that you can see on the screen, as well as changing those themes, those layouts. And this is a nice and easy tool to use, so you don't need advanced knowledge to try it. The most important thing in any presentation is getting the audience hooked right from the beginning. And in fact, that is often the title. So at a conference, I remember being at a conference and there being a title. It was a wellbeing conference that I attended a long time ago, but I still remember the title, and it was What to Do When Absolutely Everything Goes Wrong. Well, I think we've all had moments, days, weeks, months, years, perhaps, where things go wrong, because that is life. We know that there are things that will go wrong. And isn't it great to find out the solution to what could possibly go wrong? So I remember attending that presentation and it was as good as the title. So think about the title you can use in just a few words to get people hooked that want to know more, and that tells them a bit about what your session will be about. Often that problem to solution kind of area is a nice way to attract people with the title. And we want to intrigue them and we want to excite them with the title. And remember, they don't have a lot of attention span, so make sure you make it compelling. Also, when we have that presentation, there's a temptation to want to put lots of text on the screen, perhaps because we're feeling unconfident about how we might not remember things, or maybe we feel that we're not going to explain it well enough, or maybe there's too much information. This is a clear sign that we haven't really done our research properly and got confident in the facts that we want to highlight, or the information we want to highlight. We want to make it as little text as possible. So the rule of thumb is no more than 3 bullets, simple, short bullets per screen if possible, because that's going to be nice and easy to digest rather than being distracted from lots and lots of words. What you don't want is somebody to read the screen instead of listen to you. And not everybody's going to find things easy to read anyway. So try and make it easy to understand and accessible. That word accessible is key to presentations and to communication, because we're talking to very different people, different styles of learning, different kinds of ways of connecting. So think about that when you're creating the kind of visuals, the kind of content you want to use, but also the amount of text that we want to share. Now, here's some top tips from our toolkit on how to make your presentation shine. And the first one is, people ask many, many times, how many slides do I need in a presentation? And the truth is, there is no magic number. But what we don't want to do is overkill the number of presentation slides we have, because again, that's distracting. So as a rule of thumb, no more as a maximum than 1 slide per minute. So you really want to be addressing maybe 3 bullets per slide in a minute as a maximum, and less is better. So you want to keep people focused. So keep those bullet points concise. I mentioned those 3. Keep them to those highlights. And that's why building and preparing for your presentation in advance will make you think about what points you want to address at what stage of your presentation. Think also about the size and type of font that you're using, because if people are wanting to read, again, the accessibility part is key. So we want them to be large font, at least 14 points, 16 points, and we want it to be in a simple font. Very popular fonts are Arial and simple fonts such as this, but nothing too fancy, because if it's fancy, we're not really able necessarily to read it, and that can make us distracted again from what the story is in terms of the presentation and might leave us wanting something different. Also think about, again, accessibility. So the easiest font to read is dark against white. So a light background against a darker colour font. That will make it clearer to read. As you can see on the screen, we've got dark font against the white with the red to highlight the key points. Think not just about text. I talked about accessibility again in what people relate to. So some people are more video, audio. What's your learning style? Think about the different learning styles that we might want to influence during our presentation by bringing in some video content, some visuals, because visuals can say 10,000 words, making sure that it does actually tell the story we want it to tell, but think about any graphs or charts, anything that may be relevant to what we're sharing. And make sure that we vary that content to illustrate our point and highlight those points as we go and bring people into that information. But also, if we are going to share facts, that's great, because facts can be compelling, but please do share credible sources so that should anybody want to follow up at the end, they're able to do so. And keep it interesting. Vary the pace, vary the slides. Don't dwell on one point. Share different stages and highlights on the journey. So if you're running an online presentation, which as mentioned, it's becoming more and more popular and more prominent, such as the one we're running today, you might not be able to see the audience. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, but still engage as if they're there in front of you. Also, if it's a big group, you might ask Q&As and get those answers and share polls and talk to people. Really, it's a two-way communicative process when you present. And the size of the audience, again, will denote what we're going to use in terms of the technology, whether it be a Google Hangout for that one-to-one, Google Meets for a little bit bigger groups, or other sources for creating meetings and events online. So think about what you've got, but also think about how easy it is for you to use. So if it's a really complex tool, the likelihood is you're not going to feel confident presenting. So write that into your ideas and planning as to what you're going to use as a presentation tool. And finally, think about costs. So it's all about resources. We might want to create a very amazing presentation, but if it's too expensive, we can't use the tools that are there. So we have to use the ones that are free and accommodating. And there's plenty of free and accessible tools for us to use. Now, I'm just looking for questions, and it looks like we may have had one from earlier. So, Lucky, what are some common mistakes that people make when creating presentations that fail to engage the audience? Very, very good question. Thank you, Lucky. So, excuse me. The most common mistakes are probably those that I highlighted right at the beginning. So, not looking at your audience, not treating them as individuals within the audience, not engaging with them, really talking at people rather than involving them in the narrative, not keeping the tone interesting, so being too monotonous throughout, so it puts people to sleep, being in a way that you can't hear. So we need to get the sound right. But some of these tips we're going to go through in a moment, Lucky, so we'll be able to reiterate some of these points. That is a very good question that we need to figure out when we're doing presentations. The other important thing, as already mentioned, is the amount of text, because if it is just a very, very full presentation of words, it's actually going to stop anyone paying any attention, because the natural focus would be to go to what's on the screen rather than to the person. And there's no more questions because Francois, as always, is doing a fantastic job there in the chat. Thank you, Francois. So now we're on to the final part. So this is looking at boosting your presentation skills. And some of these we've just glossed over now, but we're going to look at in more depth. So creating those engaging and building those presentations that get people thinking, that get people going away with ideas, coming up with new ideas, starting new businesses, starting new jobs, getting a promotion. These are all coming from doing it the right way, getting that communication in a compelling way. As we know, careers are built through effective presenting and communicating. So we need to let people know how we think, and we can only do that by how we speak and how we share that information. So we want to do that with passion, with insight, with focus. So let's look now at how we can boost those presentation skills. And right from the beginning, we need to think about what kind of presenter we might be. So what type of presenter do you want to be within this? So we remember those best and worst presentations that we described and discussed at the beginning. Some of those we may never want to do. So we might have in our minds that we don't want to copy the lecturer who stands and looks at the board. But we might also be inspired by the people that have the open body language and the very excited and passionate approach to their presenting. Whatever kind of presenting we've seen, we need to build on the type of presenter that we'd like to be. Some people seem very good, very confident speakers, and we might think that that's an innate gift that people are born with. But the truth about the matter is actually, like any other skill, we can hone it, we can develop it, we can make it better. And it's actually something that is just a learned skill. I remember my very first presentation to quite a big audience, and it was scary. I felt very nervous. And one of the things that made me most nervous was seeing the faces in the crowd. And a few of them looked really, really disappointed to miserable to annoyed. So I actually took the courage, and it was a courageous step, to asking those three people that I mentioned there, those types of people, what their thoughts had been really candidly about the presentation and how I might improve. And it fascinated me with the response, because all three had found something valuable from the presentation, enjoyed it, and said that that was just the way that their face was taking in the information. So some of them have a face that's serious because they're going on a journey in their mind. Remember, those stories are where we go somewhere else. We're going into our own experiences. And when it goes into someone's mind, they may look serious as they're thinking through the thoughts. So one thing to remember, one tip from me as a presenter, is to not worry about people's reactions in terms of their facial expressions, because that is not necessarily telling you anything negative, and quite to the contrary, can be positive. And never be scared by your audience. They're all human just like you, and they're willing you to win. So remember that you can just build on that skill and develop. And adapt to your audience. So think about how many people you're presenting to. Is it a small group? Therefore, you don't need to think too much about walking and how you're going to pace around the room and your volume, for example, but you're going to think more about how you can engage with questions to your smaller audiences. And we often think that we're talking to a crowd, but actually we're talking to individuals within the crowd. And one of the things I've done at the very big events, the conferences and the events that I've been at, is to go around the room and introduce myself to a handful of people and get them on side before starting the event. The reason being is I can then look to them within the crowd to ensure that their message is being heard. And that's what's important, to scan across the crowd, get eye contact with important people and engage them with the crowd. And again, even in online, getting people engaged and talking to you is such an important part. But remember to reach out to those people ahead of time when at the bigger events. And what you can always do, no matter what the size of the event, is get people to participate. For larger groups, you might get them all. I mean, it's hard to ask specific questions and get all the answers all in one go, but you might ask for a share of hands. So for example, how many people have watched Game of Thrones? Or how many people like Beyonce? Stand up. So different ways that we can engage different size audiences in a simple way is really compelling. If we've got the medium-sized audiences, we may have an opportunity to answer more direct questions and ask people what they think. So, for example, have you used this product before? What were your thoughts? Or where are you from? What do you do? Why are you here? A really good question is always, what brings you to this session today? And then you can find out if you can answer those queries and questions for them and find the solution. You might want to split the group up into pairs and couple them off so that they can start to build on the narrative as well of your presentation. So different ways and different group sizes are important. And if it's a one-to-one, remember to involve them and listen with active listening and show that you've paid attention by feeding back what they've said and asking more questions about it. So what you do want to do in any presentation is avoid content overload, because too much is really ends up being nothing at all. So think about how we can reduce content overload and make it specific. The first way of doing that is to making sure that we're adding value to the audience. So we want to tailor our content, as mentioned, to the groups we're speaking to. Now, I mentioned earlier about in business, I know people that tailor their groups differently. So I know somebody who offers marketing training and she goes out to different types of businesses. And sure enough, every time the content will give examples specifically from the businesses they're in so that they can see and relate to what she's talking about. It's always nice to, for example, if you've got a plumber in the room, make an example of another plumber's business so that that is highly relatable. So think about if it's relevant to your audience and what you're saying, because that's going to be key to a successful presentation. The next is the focus. So we need to have 3 valuable points that we talked about on the bullets and make sure that we can recite those in less than a minute and get the key points across. Generally, as mentioned, less is more. So the less you say is better. And this bit's hard. I found it difficult, particularly early in my career, to pause. Pausing gives white space. It makes you have time to refocus on what you're saying and for your audience to refocus on you. It might feel uncomfortable to you, but actually to your audience, it shows composure. Now, the next point to consider is your voice. So it's a very powerful tool, and you have to think about how you can adapt depending on the situation you're in. If you're in a very big room, you might need to think of equipment, for example. But your tone, your voice is the instrument for this particular thing that you're doing in presenting. So first of all, think about the volume. It's really powerful. Think if you've got enough volume to capture the attention in the room, and then speak quietly at the key points where you want people to take in slowly what you're saying, but rise up at the key moments so that people feel that crescendo and feel connected to the key areas that you're wanting to share. Style. So style is important. You need to adapt to suit the audience that you're speaking to. So it will depend on your experience level. But we mentioned a few ways to get audience participation and to really engage. And you might find that the kind of style you want to go with could be a very strong, confident, outgoing presenter style. But we'll talk through more of that as well. So tone, how can we make our presentation more interesting? Can we vary it? As mentioned at the beginning, the monotonous tone of that lecturer that didn't change throughout the whole hour, or it felt like 7 days, meant that I didn't take anything in differently. So trying a different tone is important, and also moving around in a comfortable way if you're on the stage so that you can reach different areas of your crowd, but making sure that's at a steady pace, both in what you say and how you walk and how you move. So these elements are key to thinking about how we can make our voice powerful, keeping that pace while we're walking, that pace in the important points of the information we want to share, the tone that we want to bring, and let people know how we are conveying our stories. The next is body language. So what is our body language saying? So even if we think we're communicating very well in our voice, it's actually only a small part of our communication. Words are considered about 7%, I believe, although don't quote me on that figure, but it's a smaller part. Your body language is a huge part of what you're saying. So thinking about where we're going to use our arms, you might have seen people hunched up and making themselves small. That may make people seem really unconfident. So think about that strong body language and keeping your ability to express yourself. Your body is a tool and an instrument to communicating what you want to say. So think about how that connects with the emotions and with your listeners. Next is thinking more deeply about that. So that body language we talked about, what are the things we do when we are nervous, sad, or unconfident? We might go into ourselves. We might make ourselves really, really small. We might put our hands in our pockets and sway while we're walking across the stage. We might twiddle something. We might move our hair. We might hunch our shoulders. All of these things are the things that can make us look very unconfident or sad or not very trustworthy. So think about the things that you're doing that are giving you a negative reaction rather than a positive ones. And think about the things where the good and effective presenters speak up and you are compelled by what they do. Do they gesticulate with their hands? Do they lift their chin? Do they make eye contact with you? And do they make definitive gestures? So think about how you can use the body to your best effect. Now, I've got a little thing that I used to do with people face to face, and more so it's online now. But let's try and do our power poses. So this is recommended before you go on stage to any presentation. When on stage, it could be to a small group, to a big group, one-to-one, whatever it may be. Getting that power behind you is important. So there's two poses. The first one is the Wonder Woman. We put our hands on our hips, gives us a nice, strong standing position. And the other option is the Performer. Which one are we? So the next time you're in a stressful position, I recommend that you do this for 2 minutes and breathe deeply in and out before going on stage. And believe me, it is taking on the world when you do this. It's a change in physiology. And coaches such as Tony Robbins really have proven that that change in physiology can change our whole mindset, not just for a presentation, but for your day-to-day thoughts in your life in general. So think about how you can take on a stressful situation by bringing in that all-important power pose before going on stage, and which one suits you best. Now, stance is important. So with that power pose, it doesn't need to be a power pose all the way through the presentation, but you do want to adopt a powerful pose as you're going. So think about whether you want your arms, your shoulders back, your head high. And remember, it's almost like being pulled from a string from the ceiling when you have your very upright pose when presenting in person. So think about your stance, but also your energy levels. That really poor presentation very early on within my my studies put me off a lot, that subject. And it's because there was no energy, there was no enthusiasm, there was no excitement. Remember, bringing in enthusiasm, energy, excitement are the things that are going to make people think, they're going to remember, and they're going to take something away with them. So those 3 E's, excitement, enthusiasm, energy, are key to your presentation. And movement. Gesture naturally, move naturally. It's about being with purpose and intention. And remember that eye contact. Move around the room, look at people, engage in the eyes. No more than 6 seconds though, because it can look like staring. But for a few seconds, keep the eyes of different people in the crowd and you'll start to be able to engage. Practice makes perfect. Remember, we gave you some homework earlier. Record yourself, try some different stories and try presenting. And whenever you're presenting, get people to record it. Watch it back. It's a hard part, but it's a way of learning what you're doing well, where you can improve. And you can start to see as well how the people you admire have certain qualities that make them credible. What could you do, for example, to have that? And go back to your goals. Why are you doing this? Make sure you practice for those goals. So, for example, politicians have those clear goals right from the start about what they're trying to achieve, and it comes across in every message. Think about that as you present. We've talked about a lot of things in this presentation, but these are the key things that I'd really like you to recap on and remember throughout when you're putting together your presentation. So the first is adapting to that audience. So who's in the room? What size of audience? What type of audience? What are they going to be interested in? What about your voice? How are you going to carry yourself? Are you going to be loud enough? Will you need a microphone? What tone will you use? Are you going to be humorous, for example? Think about these things. You can also find out about in building your personal brand and writing for social media. Consider your body language and practice, practice, practice. Some final questions before we go. Sanida, how to avoid copyright issues? So we've got... Thank you very much, Francois, for answering there. So we have Grammarly as a tool that can help with that, but also making sure that if you do cite anyone in your presentation, that you use the correct sources and let people know where it's come from, and make sure that's included. Aid, how do you deal with difficult participants in the audience? Well, there's always going to be maybe somebody who's in the audience that feels they know more than anyone else. I'd invite right from the beginning, find those people, you'll discover who they are, invite them to feel a part of the presentation so that they are answering questions for you and getting involved, and so that they can feel like the hero in the presentation. Once they get the spotlight on them, they'll take it off you. Sabajit, how to connect to audiences in an effective manner? Well, in an effective way is about making sure we know who they are, what they care about, and creating that storyline, as mentioned earlier in the presentation. And re-watch this, so you can come back to this link for 24 hours, and there's lots of notes in there for you in terms of how you can communicate effectively. So that's all for questions. And thank you, Francois, for your answering in the chat as well. I'm sure you agree that he's been a fantastic moderator for us today. Now, your next steps, please do visit those courses. I mentioned writing for social media and building an online presentation. There's also YouTube Your Brand if you're a business, and it's all at g.co/digital garage. And please do share an interest in this career certificate, because it's a fantastic opportunity for you to find out more about the job seeking market and being prepared for it so that you are fully upskilled for what's required. And please share your feedback at #digitalgarage and goo.gul/digital garage feedback. It's been an honor to be able to present to you today. And I hope that you take away from this something that makes you feel more confident and more able to present in your next presentations. And I wish you all very much success into your future. Thank you.